Welcome to another session on high yield routines. My name is Janice Nowakowski, and I'm the district teacher consultant for mathematics and numeracy in the Richmond School District. In this video, we are going to be looking at the routine estimation 180. So estimation 180 is a routine in which you project an image, a photograph, or a short video, and you encourage students to estimate either how many or how far or how big or how heavy. Estimation is usually about quantity or a measurement, and students use visualizing, using reference, using number sense and reasoning. They consider lower and upper limits. So that idea of what is reasonable, what is a range that would be reasonable to estimate for the different images. So estimating reasonably is one of our curricular competencies here in British Columbia from kindergarten through grade 9. So at every grade level of our mathematics curriculum. And, sometimes students want to get the exact number when they estimate, or they do wild guesses. And so we really want to encourage that understanding that estimating uses thinking and reasoning and information that you know and what you know about numbers or quantity or measurement to make a reasonable estimation. And so two of the things that can help with that is using the term aboutness. So like about how many or about how far. And so it's not exact, you're looking for that about, so that idea of a range. And then also thinking of what could be too low, what could be too high, those lower and upper limits that are reasonable. So instead of saying an exact number like 34, but that's my estimate, your estimate might be between 30 and 35. So that idea of a range helps students really focus a little bit more on the reasonableness of their estimate. So estimation180.com is a website developed by Andrew Stadell, who's a middle school teacher in California. And these are all the images are free to use. And it's called estimation 180 because typical school years have 180 school days in the United States, or at least in California. So there's one for at least every day of the year. The website also has lots of other lesson ideas and resources and student recording forms that you can use alongside the estimation 180 images. So estimation 180 can again be used across different mathematical curricular topics around quantity, around height or length, around how much something weighs. I'll share some that involve coins. They're American coins, but we could take new pictures and use Canadian coins. So sort of to connect to financial literacy, and that understanding of value also comes into play. And so sort of the process for estimation 180, you go to the website and you can see there on the left, you see the page, and you can choose the different, go through in sequence, or you can just choose the ones that, sort of connect for you and your students, share the image and have them focus on, well, what information is important and what is sort of, background information, and sort of eliminate the things that you don't need. And then thinking about a referent, and that might be a smaller quantity of something like, if you're measuring a quantity of something, well, how much space does 2 or 3 take up? And so how can I use that to think about the greater quantity? Or in thinking about, one of the images is Andrew's height. And so what could you use in the background to think about, well, if that bush is probably about, half a meter tall, so how does that help me think about how tall, that teacher is? So using the idea of a referent to help you make comparisons, and using reasoning to think about your estimate. And then thinking about what is a reasonable lower limit, and again, what makes sense, what is reasonable, using thinking, and then what is reasonable upper limit. I was in a class last week, and someone was saying that lower limits maybe 10 to 20, and upper limits, one student showed out 10,000 because it just seemed like a big number, an upper limit. And then we talked about, well, yeah, that could be too high, it could be a high limit, but is it a reasonable upper limit? Is it really sort of a reasonable range? So talking about that with your students. You can have students write their lower limit and upper limit on post-it notes, and then come up on the whiteboard and post them, and then put those in order and see sort of where that upper limit is, consensus around the class, the upper and the lower limits. So that's something I've done with classes as well. So again, here's just a screenshot of, one of the pages. If you click on day 1 to 20, you'll get all these different images, and some of them sort of go together in sequence, and some of them are a little bit more in isolation. So I've done many of these ones in different classes for different reasons. I haven't done the height of Mr. Stadell because that's not a personal connection for our students, but I have taken pictures of others and use those sort of, people that are more familiar to the students. But we'll zoom in on one of the tasks, maybe I think it's day 14, the stapler, because that's something that's in every classroom, something that's familiar to students. So when you click on that day 14, you get the image and you get the question. So again, it starts with that about, not how many, about how many staples are in a single strip. And you can see this photograph is taken very carefully, so it covers the amount that might be on the box, and it shows the strip. And again, students can then use a reference. Well, I can sort of count maybe 5. And so how many of those 5 staples make up that strip? And then you see on the bottom, there's a reveal tab. And then with your students, you can click on that reveal. Sometimes there's a little video with counting out the materials, or other times it just tells you the number. The Estimation 180 website has been updated recently, but prior to that, you could actually enter in an estimation. What do you think is too low? What do you think is too high? And then what your estimate is. And then you would have to, also put in your reasoning, your explanation for that, and your name. And I often did that as a whole class. We would, post our what is too low, post our what is too high, and then we would come in and then come to consensus as a whole class in terms of what our estimate would be. We would enter that, and then you submit that, and then you would get sort of where some data in terms of that over time from different classes. Now it just has the reveals. So a little sad that that piece is now missing, but you could still do that process with your students. So here was in a grade 4 or 5 class a couple years ago, when students were thinking using a ruler was going to help them make their estimate. And then you can see on the board, a very typical old whiteboard with lots of smudges all over it, how we came to consensus and what our lower limits were, our high limits, and then discussing together about what would be a reasonable estimate and submitting that. And then after the students did that, we had planned to move on to something else, but they were so engaged with this idea of using an image and estimating that we abandoned the lesson that we had planned, the classroom teacher and I. Oh, and there's the reveal. Sorry, that would be the reveal picture that comes up. So you can see it says 210 staples per strip. And then students could figure out how many were in the box as well and do an estimate around that. So again, to follow up with this lesson, instead of doing our regular lesson, we ended up inviting the students to create their own Estimation 180 images. So they found things around the classroom. We went and found the iPad cart and pulled some iPads from that. And they worked in teams of 2 or 3 to collect an image, and usually from a couple different perspectives. And so that they would have a couple different tasks. So how many pages in one book, how many pages in, 5 dictionaries, how many pens in a box, how many pens in all the, felt pens in all the boxes we have in our class, etc. And then, we projected those, and the students, you can see on the bottom right there, led the class through the Estimation 180 routine. So what do you notice? What information is important? What would your lower limit be? What would, too high or an upper limit be? And what would be a reasonable range? And then what might your estimate be? And then that ended up being the rest of our lesson. So here's another example. This was in a grade 4 or 5 class. And this is right from the Estimation 180 website. So there's a series of these with almonds. And so there's a quarter cup measure and about how many almonds are in the cup. And you can see there's 1 almond to the left in the image that you can use as a referent. And that's a very common estimation strategy. And you can see on the left, I've just recorded as students called out what they thought the lower limit was and what the upper limit was. We talked on the right, you can see I've written the word range and, between 10 and 20, because that was a new term for some of the students. So sometimes I put up that keyword or key vocabulary so students can see that and use that. And then you can see where we decided on the range at the bottom there. And then the reveal for this particular one is a video where Andrew's counting, all the almonds that were in the cup and placing them out in different arrays. And so students then made connections to multiplication in terms of determining how many almonds there were. And then the next one was if you went to Costco and you bought a whole container of almonds, about how many almonds would be in a new container. Now using the visual reference of the quarter cup measure with they now know that there's 28 almonds in there. And again, you can see the lower limit on the left and the upper limit on the left as well. And then thinking about what is reasonable and thinking about what range is reasonable. And then you can see on the right, then the reveal. They didn't count out all the almonds in the container, but they did use multiplication to think about how many servings there are and then what a serving size was. And so students use that information to calculate about how many almonds were in the container and then compared it to their estimate to see if it was reasonable. And then also in that class, after we did that, the students had a choice of a couple of math games or to create their own estimation 180 image. And so this student wanted to do 2 different containers with cubes. And so there's his image in terms of estimate how many cubes are in these containers. And the student chose to take the image from above. So you can't necessarily see how many layers they are, but that's part of the learning process in designing these your own images. But then here was his reveal in terms of, how many were in each. So he knew he needed a reveal picture as well. So that's a great task that you could do with students as a follow-up to the estimation 180 routine. This is in a grade 4 class. And again, we were thinking about financial literacy a bit. So I did this as the opener to the lesson where we're thinking about decimals and monetary forms. So this, of course, it's American pennies in here, but we did a reminder. You can see on the right that 100 pennies is equal to 100 cents, which is equal to $1 in case students needed that. And we wanted them to really focus on the value, not the quantity of the pennies, even though with pennies, it's essentially the same. But you can see again, we talked about that term range, we talked about the decimal notation, and then had students share what they thought the lower limit was and what the upper limit was. And then the reveal for this was also a video. And then there was a bowl of nickels. So once we found out about how many pennies there were, I can't remember exactly what it was, we used that information to help them think about the nickels. And again, you can see on the bottom there, it says explain and justify. I said, that's a really important part of mathematics. And so it's not just sharing your estimate or your range, it's about why you think that is and explaining and justifying your thinking. So again, for the bowl of nickels, you can see at the bottom, there's either the choice of the video reveal or the photo reveal. And one of the things I like to do with a video reveal is I start it and then I pause it partway through. And then I ask students if they want to adjust their estimates based on this new information that they have, because a lot of them are quite surprised. And again, remembering that this is the value of the nickels, not the quantity of the nickels. And so just playing with that language a little bit is important. But yes, pausing the video at 1 or 2 different spots and having students, adjust their estimate based on new information is one way I use this routine as well. And then you can see on the bottom right there, there's the photo reveal of how many nickels as well as the value. And then this was in a grade 6-7 class. Again, we were doing financial literacy numeracy tasks as the main part of the lesson. So I used the estimation 180 as a routine just to remind them about the monetary values of different coins and coin combinations and how many quarters again makes $1 and how we would write that. All these things, providing those access points for all students and making sure that they have the background information that they need in order to be successful with the routine and the task. As you can see here in the question on the whiteboard, I've underlined those words about. It's not, how many, it's not an exact science. About, we're estimating, and then the value. So it's not the number of quarters, it's the value of the bowl of quarters. So how many dollars might be in here. And again, you can see I've set it up with the lower limit and upper limit, and then recorded their ideas and talked about the range. And then we did the video and the photo reveal on the right. And with this class, again, I did the pause partway through, and some of them were like, because they were quite a bit off. And so they adjusted based on new information. But I find that really effective too, and gives them a chance to use their thinking and reasoning and applying it in a new way. So here are just some of the curriculum connections to the Estimation 180 routine. Of course, estimating reasonably, but also visualizing, communicating, thinking, explaining, and justifying. And then again, depending on the image that you use, be number concepts or measurement, fractions, decimals, operations with decimals, and multiplication coming in there, when we think of the coins, for example. And then, as always, we have the Estimation 180 posters, those routine posters that are available in English and en français, both on the district math blog and our district portal. So think about how will you use this high yield instructional routine with your students?